John's worked with us for a couple of years on some college planning things, as well as just baseball and softball things. Has a lot of experience in the industry, as well as personal experience with a few athletes that have played or are currently playing sports in college. A couple that I've had an opportunity to work with, teach, or coach at some point, which has been incredible. So I'm going to pass you off to him. Any questions that you have, please put them in the chat. We'll address those when we get into the Q&A portion right after this presentation. All right. Thanks, guys. And I'll be in and out back and forth a little bit. If you need anything, just yell, I got you.
All right, sounds good. All right, well, thanks for being here. So this is about the things that you need to know as parents of college-bound student athletes. And Jake was being a little vague on things, but yes, I have 3 Division I athletes. One is graduated, is playing pro volleyball overseas, and one's playing volleyball at Stanford, and the other's pitching for Belmont University after having pitched at Brown. So I've been through the recruiting process in numerous ways, and my 2 daughters started out playing travel softball. So they got tall and moved over to the volleyball. So just to let you know, this is where we go. So let's see here. Meeting somebody. All right. All right, so here's my contact information. College Planning Strategies is a preferred partner of the BAMFAM organization. So I will be gradually increasing my presence here at the building over the course of the next few months. So you'll have access to me on quite a few days, evenings, things like that, whatever you need. So please reach out to ask questions at any time. All right, here's facts and figures that you need to know from just a general perspective. 4-year education is now going from 92,000 to 300,000. 57% of parents will raid their retirement savings to pay for a 4-year education. Those age 50 and plus are the fastest growing age group holding student loan debt. 18.2 billion is held in debt is held by those age 65 and older, and it's not their student debt. It's their children or grandchildren's student debt that they've signed for. Average 4-year overpayment per student is $30,000, and 80% of families actually overpay for school. So I'm here to help you figure out how not to do that. So everything that I'm going to speak about today is general in nature, and it's not specific to any particular family situation, because everybody's situation is going to be different than the other family. So we want to make sure that you know that when you're speaking with me, it's going to be with respect to your family situation and not in general. So let's see here. So college admissions is confusing and complex. There's thousands of 4-year schools to choose from, and making it affordable for the family is going to be very complicated at times, because every school has its own process, its own way to deal with financial aid, how to recruit athletes, etc. So applications, admissions, and financial aid processes are much different than when I was in school, and much different than probably when you were in school. So preparing your student and your family for college can be overwhelming. You definitely need to know the steps necessary, because it's not just a quick ride. It's a campaign. You need to start planning basically no later than sophomore year in high school. In fact, we want our clients to be anywhere from 7th to 10th grade. Because of the way financial aid is done now. They look back 2 years for assets and income, and they base financial aid the first year on the tax return 2 years prior to that. So we want to make sure that you're set up to look as quote unquote poor as possible to the schools when it comes to financial aid. So how do you afford the expenses? Let's see here. Savings, 70% of families haven't saved enough to cover 4 years of school, let alone 1 year. So we know that savings is not going to be where the money for school is going to come from. Not for everybody, for sure. Loans, with the way the expense of school is now, that loans, both student and parent, are going to be part of the situation. So we want to make sure that, since loans are going to be part of the most family scenario, that we know what we're doing, what the family is doing, and how to take the loans, and basically have the process for paying those loans off so that you're not holding debt for 10, 20, or 30 years down the road. Private scholarships, that's like when you're looking for different scholarships. It's not athletic, it's not academic, it's private scholarships. And that's only about 3% of the financial aid available outside of what the schools make available. And so finding some is not a bad thing if they're local and you have contacts that can help it out. But don't spend a whole lot of time looking for those scholarships, because thousands of people are applying for them and very few win. Less expensive schools, I guess it depends on the type of program that you're looking at academically. It may not be the best alternative to go to a less expensive school. It may not be the right fit for your student, and it may actually cost you more in the long run than a school that you hadn't considered or had crossed off because of price. So, and definitely, we don't want you to skip school altogether just because it might cost the student between $1 million and $2 million in lifetime income, if not more. So we definitely want to make sure that we've got all the bases covered for you. So here's the actual Department of Education financial aid flow chart. I'm sure that's easy to understand. So I know it's very difficult for me to follow all the arrows here and there and everything, but that's what you're facing down the road here. So how do they punish you as parents? Well, they're going to look at excuse me, your basically your adjusted gross income, and they're going to look at 22 to 47% of that expected family contribution is going to come from that number. Then they're going to look at your assets that aren't sheltered from the financial aid calculation and charge about 6% of that. They're going to look at students' income and students' asset and utilize some of that as well. So that's one reason we want you to look as poor as possible. We can help you figure out how to shelter your assets and income from the calculation, because that's probably going to be part of the financial aid package that your students are awarded down the road. So private schools, why consider private schools? Because it may actually cost you equal or less to send to a private school as opposed to a public, based on the way that they calculate financial aid. Schools will look at, what after the government calculates your expected family contribution, they'll look at what your need is, and then they will base what financial aid package they award based on their formulas. And some schools meet 100% of need, some schools meet 50 to 60% of need. And student loans are considered part of the need package, because you don't need to have a good credit score as a student to qualify for those loans, and they have a great repayment rates. So student loans are considered part of financial aid. So basically, if you follow this chart here, that depending on the private university versus public university, and I can say, let's say Notre Dame versus Ball State or Indiana State here in Indiana, it might actually cost you equal to or less to go to Notre Dame if you qualify to get there than to Ball State or Indiana State. It's funny how that works, but it's true. So can you get aid from this, help from the school counselor or the college financial aid officer? Yeah, didn't have enough coffee today, I don't think. But school counselors in Indiana, they can have up to 600 students that they're available to assist. That's 180 school days. They may not be able to help everybody that's in their charge, so they may not have an idea how nor the time to help. They don't know how to help you shelter your assets and income, so they don't know how to maximize your aid eligibility. They don't know how to pick the schools with the best gifting formulas. Their job basically is to help you figure out your curriculum, make sure you're being challenged but not overwhelmed, and help you be the best student you can, and possibly help you look at schools that you might qualify for academically, but they have no idea if you can actually afford to go there. They don't know how to help you negotiate a better award package if that's what the situation calls for, and they have no idea how to pay for school on a tax-favored basis. And then the school financial aid officers, what incentive do they have to help you pay the least amount to go to their school? So it's like asking the IRS to help you prepare your own tax return. It's just not the best idea. So your challenge is different because you're different than the general family out there. You have an athlete that wants to and plans on playing a sport in college. So your challenge is greater than typical parents. And based on skills and abilities, is a good shot, good chance, especially if they're playing for BAMFAM, that they're going to have an opportunity to play in college, right? But excuse me, but they're also likely to have pretty good grades. So if that, with working through this program, having the grades, we know that they're going to be able to play. Coaches will come calling, right? Nothing to worry about, no expenses. There'll be no student or parent loans. And that's not the reality that we face as baseball and softball parents. Chances are it's not going to be a full ride. And if it's only a partial scholarship, you need to plan accordingly for that situation, right? So biggest hurdle your family faces, depending on the year, between 4 and 7% of all high school athletes will actually play a sport in college. And it may not be the sport that they're prepared for. For example, schools in the Northeast look for rowers and crew members for their rowing teams. Here in the Midwest, you look at basketball players because they're really strong. They have great cores and leg development, and they can get, your basketball player can get a crew scholarship. So it's a good chance that, you may be playing a different sport in college. Nevertheless, it's only 4 to 7% of high school athletes will play a sport. And here's, we're going to look at the 20 to 21 college athletic scholarship statistics. Start with baseball. 512,000 high school players, 61% of them will play in college, 61,000 play in college. So that's 11.8% at any college level, and only 2.1% will play at the Division I level. So that's 8-to-1 odds that you'll play at any college level, and 47-to-1 odds that you make a D1 roster. D1 programs, if they're fully funded, have 11.7 scholarships to split among 27 players typically. There's usually a 35-person roster that, so a lot of those players have are on 25 to 30% scholarships as opposed to full rides. D2 programs, 9 scholarships to split. D3 is based on academics. NAI has 12 scholarships, and JUCOs that fully funded have 24 scholarships. Back when my son was recruited to play baseball, the University of Dayton had 6 fully funded scholarships to split among those 27 players, and they actually did fundraising for another 2. So they didn't even have the full 11.7 scholarships that was permitted via the NCAA. But if you look at the average roster size, D1's 36, D2's 42, D3's 36, NAI's 42, and JUCO's 23. So this tells you that the chances of a full ride are very slim. In fact, usually non-existent when it comes to the baseball situation. Typically, your best scholarships offers are around 60%, and they go for the pitchers, middle infielders, and center field. So that's typically what it is in baseball. Then you've got the softball scenario. 389,000 high school players, 33,000 play in college, 8.5% at any college level, and 1.7 at the D1 level. So it's odds are 12-to-1 that you make any roster, and 61-to-1 that you make a D1 roster. And they're based, you have 12 scholarships in D1, 7.2 in D2, 10 at NAI, and 24 at JUCO. So baseball and softball are not full ride sports in college at any level. And typically the only full ride scholarships occur at the D1 level. And men, it's 2 sports, basketball and football. And women, it's 4 sports, volleyball, basketball, gymnastics, and tennis. So baseball and softball are not necessarily a full rides. If you get offered a full ride, then you are truly an elite athlete, and that's taking money from other students that they may want to recruit. So those are eye-opening statistics, right? So based on that, if you haven't planned on other than a full ride, how are you going to pay for your share of the cost of attendance, especially when we're looking at, let's say, 23 to 25,000 a year up to 75, 80,000 a year, depending on the school that schools that are recruiting your son or daughter. Because the reality is that the best school for your student may not be one that's recruiting your student. So now you're limited to, it's tougher on parents of student athletes, and I've been through it, 3 kids. It's tougher on us because we are limited to the schools that want our student to play for them. So, they may not have the best financial aid calculations. They may not have as much money to award, et cetera. So we've got a harder road to hoe, so to speak. So we need to know how we're going to pay for what's not covered by the scholarship, right? So where do we find the money? Well, finances of college planning, we need to make sure that every dollar we spend is invested wisely. We need to protect our retirement assets. Because you may be co-signing for private student loans, we want to make sure that our that our children, our students are prepared for the job market that exists at the time of graduation. We don't want to select the wrong school. We don't want them to fail to graduate or take too long to graduate or run out of money. Basically, with COVID coming into the scenario, it makes it even worse because now schools are facing financial disparities. Like Notre Dame sometime last year, indicated they expected to lose $100 million over the course of last year going into this year. I know my brother's alma mater, Urbana University, which is D2, is closed for good, closed last year for good because they just couldn't afford to stay open because students weren't on campus. So we know schools are going to go bankrupt, schools are going to close. We don't know necessarily which ones, but McMurray College in Illinois was one that closed. University of Wisconsin has made plans to reduce the number of satellite campuses they have because of the cost of keeping them open is not equating with the revenues that they've been generating with students not living on campus and going online from home. So it's a whole different world out there. So career questions, obviously COVID's changed the landscape, and schools will have to pare back the programs they offer. They're going to have to figure out how they're going to handle their endowments that have shrunk for numerous reasons. So they're going to let go, professors are shutting down programs. They're going to have to be more responsive to the students and their parents so that when they graduate, they have a career to go to. So when it comes to school, is GPA important? It hasn't been as important in the last few years as it may be now. And certainly there's studies out there that show that a high school GPA lends, rather than the SAT and ACT scores, lend credibility for the ability to succeed in college, regardless of what type of high school they've gone to. So GPA is becoming more important in the whole scheme of things. You also want to know what industries are booming, so you're not getting a degree in a program that will not have any jobs available when graduation occurs. If you don't know what to do, then we definitely need to help those students figure out what that is so we can identify the schools that have the programs that they're most interested in and have the best financial aid calculations for parents and students. Is a gap year a possibility? Absolutely. Are there any alternatives to college that you may want to consider? So school questions: how financially secure is the school? What's the 3-year default rate? Basically, 3 years after graduation, how many students have defaulted on student loans? Well, that'll tell you a lot of things you need to know about their academic programs and what the viability of that school is as well. What's the school's graduation rate? How long does it take the average student to graduate? We want our students to graduate in 4 to 4.5 years, but right now it's taking about 6 years on average for students to graduate. So that's another $30,000 to $60,000 that may be loans that the student will have to burden themselves with. And our schools setting students up to fail, basically offering programs that have nowhere to go once they graduate. So we want to make sure that when the student athlete's being recruited, that the schools that they're recruiting them are schools that are viable for that athlete to attend, with the odds of going pro, slim to none in sport, sports of baseball and softball and just about any other college sport. Then we want to make sure that their future is not burdened with excessive amounts of student debt, and make sure they have the graduating programs that they're able to get jobs in as well. So that's part of what we do for our clients. Financial questions: what's the true cost of an education? What's your personal return on investment? How much will you be able to earn upon graduation? How long will it take you to repay your loans? And what if it takes too long to graduate? What are you going to do, right? So basically, Benjamin Franklin said, if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. So the question is, if you don't act when you need to act to start, preparing your family and your students for the actual college planning campaign, then what consequences can you expect? If you don't do anything, then you really can't expect anything, right? The thing is that those without a plan spend up to 3.5 times more for a college education than those with a plan. So what do you do, right? Where do you start when it comes to that, right? So